Hello everyone. So today we'll be talking about grid a bit more. We've already talked about the very basics of grid layout, and I personally use that very basic part myself most of the time because we don't really need the very advanced things in our projects for most of the time, not always. But yeah, let's go ahead and kind of recap to what we have learned so far. So let's go ahead and go to the CSS tricks site, and I'll be sharing the link down below. You can check this out yourself as well. So firstly, we need to add display grid. Inline grid almost does the same thing, but it's an inline level grid. So same goes for flex. When we use only flex, we get block level flex, and when we use inline grid, we get inline level grid. Okay, so we've already talked about grid template column and grid template rows and how we can do that. So we've already done that in our last video. So we'll have to have some divs with some height and width here, as you can see, and we'll have to say display grid and then add a gap. Let's go for 10 pixels gap. So the gap will be 10 pixels, and grid template columns we can add like this, 1FR. How many how many columns will be there? It depends on how many time I write here 1FR or anything. Okay, so we've written 4 times. I'm getting 4 items. Let's go for one more, 5, and as you can see, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so there was another way to do this. Use a repeat function and use how many times you want to do it. Let's say 2 times, and the size, let's go for 200 pixels to show you guys. So it is 200 pixels now. Let's go for 100 pixels. Okay, so the gap is now 100 pixels, not the gap, the distance, let's say. So let's go for 1FR and let's go for 4. So yeah, there are 4 in each column, and we do the same thing for grid template rows as well. But let's go ahead and talk about some child elements. Here, as you can see, properties for the parent. So the template columns and the grid template rows are element for the parent grid container, and the children the grid items. So anything in between the grid box parent, anything that is the grid child, they're grid items, they're called grid items. So they have some properties as well. Grid column start, grid column end, grid row start, grid row end. Let's go ahead and have a look at grid column start. So by this you can select where you want your grid child to start. So let's go ahead and target grid box child. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see better. Okay, so grid box child 2, and then we can go for what did we say there? I forgot. Grid column start here. Grid column start, let's say 2 for now. So as you can see, nothing changed because by default the column is starting from 2, but if I add 3 here, as you can see, it's starting from here. So we have 4 columns now, 1 2 3 4, and whatever we set here, grid column start, it will start from there. Let's see, grid column 1, grid column start 1, and as you can see, it started from next line because the column 1 has already been taken by 1 here, so it is pushing it to the next line and starting from here. Let's add some margin here because it's looking pretty bad. Too much, 5 pixels would be enough. Yeah, so as you can see, if I want to add grid column start 1, it will start from here because 1 is taken by our one previous in previous column, so it is starting from here. So let's go ahead and add 2. So 2 will be here because the second position in the column is still available, so 2 will take it. If I add 3, so it is starting from third item, third position of the column, and others are getting pushed down. And we can use 4 as well. As you can see, it's taking the place here. Let's go ahead and inspect it using Control Shift C. Control Shift C, and we can click on the grid right here, grid, and you can see the line numbers here. This is the column 1, this is column 2, column 3, column 4, and this is row 1, 2, 3. As you can see, this is for column 1, 2, 3, 4. We can go for 3 as well. Let's make this 3 and have a reload. Okay, so we've specified 4 here, that's why I think grid template is making one more column. If we delete that, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, we have 1, 2, 3. This is starting from 3 because we set it to start from 3, and we have 3 template columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is not available, -1 it is showing. However, let's go for 2, and we can start from here, as you can see, and let's go for 1, and if we use 1, it is starting from here because, as I've mentioned previously, it is the first position, and then second, then third. So the first position here is already taken by 1, and we can't overwrite it at this line, so it is starting from the next line. Same goes for grid row start. Let's go for 3, and as you can see, the row 1, 2, 3, and as we've mentioned here, grid row start 3, it is starting from 3, the same 2. As you can see, the same second child, so the 2 is starting from third row because we mentioned 3 here. If we mention 4, in the same way, it is creating one more in the row, like it was doing here for 4 when we were having only 3 columns. Okay, so let's go ahead and add 1 once again. And as we've mentioned 1 grid row, so it is now taking the first place, removing 1 from there because we have explicitly mentioned that grid row start should be 1. So as if we comment this code out, we can comment out by control and slash, and now we can see that the row is automatically started from the next line, not from the same line, because we haven't explicitly mentioned where we want our row to start. If we want our row to start from 1, it will now overwrite this 1's grid row start, which was also 1, and the column start, which was also 1 for that, but that got overwritten. Let's comment this one out for a while, and as you can see, we have 2 here. Let's go for grid column end, and we can use 3, and as you can see, we have, let's go for 4, and as you can see, we have started it from 1, and it is taking one more empty space right here. We can set it to be 4 as well, and as you can see, let's go for the grid. We can select this grid box and then click on the grid to see the rows and the columns, and as we can see, grid column end, grid column start is 1, so we are starting from here 1, and the grid column end is 4, so we are ending at 4 is right here. As you can see, 4 is right here and we are ending it right here. Okay, so the row grid row end is the pretty much the same as well. Let's just comment this one out and let's go for grid row start once again. So grid row end 3, and as we can see, we are taking 1 2, and when it came to 3, the 3 is not included here. So as you can see, we are ending at 2 essentially, 1 and 2, and 3 is not included here. Let's go ahead and inspect it and click the grid view to understand it better. So 1 2 and 3 is right here, so it is ended right here. We're not going for 4. Let's go for 4, and as we can see, 4 is taken by the same 2 as well, but this doesn't have enough height to take everything. Let's add a bit more height to it. We've already defined height and width here. We'll essentially override the previous height and width, so let's go for 500 pixel. And now as we can see, 2 is taking all the space we want. As you can see, even overwriting, going for beyond what it can be assigned by row end. Okay, so that's how grid column start and grid column end works. Let's delete all of this, or let's just comment them out, and let's go for grid column start 2, which was by default. Okay, so the next stuff, grid column and grid row. So grid column and grid row are shorthand for grid column start plus grid column end, and grid row start plus grid row end. Let's have a look here. So we can write grid column start and grid column end, or we can just go for grid column or grid row only. So by default, we are taking one column. So as you can see, we've mentioned grid column start and grid column end 2 and 3. So it is working like by default. By default, they're taking the same exact space as well. If we comment them out or keep them, it doesn't make any difference. Let's go for the shorthand one, grid column 2 by 3. So it is essentially saying the same thing as grid column started at 2 and ended at 3. And as you can see, nothing changes. But we can use 4 here. So it will essentially, it is shorthand for grid column start 2 and grid column end 4. And sure enough, as you can see, we are taking 2 columns now, 2 and 3, and ending at 4. There's the line for 4. We can inspect this again. We can select the full grid container and then click this grid to see all the lines. The column ones are here, 1 2 3 and 4. We're ending at 4, and they are the line row ones. Okay, so it is the shorthand for grid column start and grid column end. So the grid column start 2 and grid column start 4 can be written like this, 2 by 4 as well. So if we keep this or comment this one out and enable this one, doesn't change anything because it's the same, and the same goes for grid row start and grid row end. It works exactly the same way. Grid area, grid template areas. Okay, so gives an item a name, can be referenced by a template. I think these are a bit advanced topic for grid, and we don't want to dive too deep into CSS grid because we want to jump to JavaScript soon, because We are a bit late to our schedule because I was planning to jump into JavaScript by this time, but I couldn't do it because I had some issues. So I couldn't upload as much videos as I wanted. So yeah, but it's fine. We'll jump into JavaScript very soon. I just have a few more CSS topics to cover. I will be covering like pseudo elements and pseudo classes, and then we've already talked about pseudo class a little bit, like hover and stuff, but we'll talk about pseudo elements and pseudo classes a bit, and then we'll talk about media queries to make our site responsive. As you can see, if we go for the mobile view, we can click here inspect, or just use Ctrl Shift I or C, whatever, and then go for mobiles. Let's go for mobile. As you can see, the margin is not applied, and if we go further, smaller mobile views, as you can see, they are not responsive. They are not responsive at all, but we can make them responsive by um, media queries, and we'll see how in our upcoming videos. But before that, we'll talk about pseudo classes and pseudo elements. For now, I hope you understood everything I talked about grid, but if you didn't, comment down below to let me know what you didn't understand, so I can re-upload a video probably by tomorrow or today if possible, but maybe not in the same day. Maybe in the next or the day after that day. But I will get back to you, or I will comment to help you understand what you didn't understand. Okay, so for now, the basics of grade is covered, and I will see you guys in the next video about pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in the next one.